Okay, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your time in the Sarah room, your 10 minutes of reprieve. We are now back together. We're going to venture to the next room, which is back to Abraham, although this is the second part, Abraham part 2. These three rooms, as you'll learn, obviously build on each other, and it's important to know the backstory really before we can fully appreciate what this room is focusing on. Recall 2 rooms ago, 2 hours-ish ago, that we focused on Abraham and his willingness to swiftly and without equivocation go when God said, get up and go. Go to a place, and you don't need to put it in your phone. I'll tell you where it is. Just trust me with each step, and he did. And we talked through the issues that he likely wrestled with as he reached that decision to obey and go, and the logistics and the opportunities to second guess and delay or whatnot. And we frankly looked at some of the missteps along the way of his going, how he twice felt like he needed to claim his wife to be his sister for self-preservation purposes. Anyhow, that was 2 rooms ago. Y'all just left a couple minutes ago to come join me here in room number 3 of this triad. Was focused on Sarah and focused on her faith. And the commendation, the inscription in the wall spoke specifically to her faith as it related to her becoming a mom at a ripe old age of 90. We saw that in the statue, nonagenarian. But we also looked at other aspects of her faith. I gave her credit. We as the museum staff rightfully give her credit for her role in the prior room in enabling Abram to go and to take with him all of his entourage, including his wife, and there's no indication that she was anything but cooperative and faithful and supportive in that decision, and I feel that requires a great deal of faith. Because God spoke to Abram, didn't speak to Sarah, so Sarah's having to trust God and trust her husband, and that the 2 of them are on the same page and they're going the right way at the right time and all this business. But then obviously this room that you just left focused mostly on being a mom at age 90 and the faith that it took to do that, and we didn't really get to talk through the likely challenges she faced as a 90-year-old mom for the first time. Again, that's obviously foreign to us because that's not something that we could even contemplate here in our day, now millennia removed from Abram and Sarah, with more of sin's impact on our life and lifespans, dropping quite dramatically from what they were back then. Anyway, all that to lead to this room here. We call it Abram Part 2. As you see on your tour map, this room focuses on sacrificing willingly. So before we get into really looking at the room and what's depicted in here, can I get somebody to read the inscription on the east wall? It's also found in Hebrews 11, verses 17 through 19. And thank you, sir, for volunteering. Go ahead. Actually, hang on. Are we all there? Hebrews 11, let's make sure we're there. Yes.
By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He, who had embraced the promises, was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, "It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned." Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead. And so, in a manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from the dead.
All right, very good, thank you. So this is one of the more popular, maybe is not the right word to describe this room, but one of the more regarded rooms in our museum. It's a story that's not as familiar as the Noah story from rooms ago. Most non-Christian, non-Bible believers have heard of the Noah's Ark story. Those folks likely have not heard of this one, but most who know the Bible are familiar with this episode of Abram being called to sacrifice Isaac. And as you see behind me on both the east and the west wall, you see 2 very different depictions of that event. And we're going to talk through what each of those depictions is trying to communicate to us, the visitors. But first, let me again set the stage. I did it a little bit a moment ago, but let's specifically focus on this issue of Abram's promised son. As I think his name was Lee read earlier, that Isaac was the one identified as being, the promised seed from whom Abram would have descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky. So recall that the call 2 rooms ago, Abram was 75. He was Abram, first off, and he was 75. And we learned later on that there's a 10-year difference. So he's 75, Sarah's 65. They go. At some point later, it seems like it's fairly recent in time to that calling. How recent? A year, a month? We're not really sure. The narrative doesn't give us a specific time frame. But shortly after that call, Abram and God are having a chat, and Abram's lamenting, I have no kids. When I pass, my servant's son is going to become my heir. And he's, I wouldn't say he's complaining to God, but he's distraught by that scenario. And God assures him, he says, come out of your tent. Look up in the sky, see all the stars. You're going to have kids as numerous as those. Your descendants are going to be as numerous. Anyhow, so Abram's excited about that. He hears that, tells that to his wife, Shirley. They apparently do their best. The biological aspect of rearing kids just doesn't work. So they decide to go to plan B. Sarah specifically offers her servant Hagar to be the surrogate mom. I'm not sure, what God's plan is. I can hear her kind of communicating to her husband. I'm not sure what God's plan is, but, it's been like 8 years. We haven't had kids. We're getting to the point that, we may not be able to from a what we understand science perspective. Hagar's younger. Maybe she can help, solve this dilemma. So he agrees, has a child with Hagar. That child's name was? Ishmael. Thank you, Ishmael. And people commonly, and I think correctly, it's obviously debatable, but people typically link Ishmael as the forefather of what people group? Arabs, yes. So he gives birth through Hagar. She gives birth. He bears through Hagar Ishmael. Things are going okay, but God comes and clarifies the message that Ishmael is not the promised son. You're going to have a son, the one I promised, and you're going to have it through your wife. And again, as we looked, the passage wasn't really clear earlier that initial promise was linked to Sarah. They presumed as much, but when it wasn't happening, they figured, okay, maybe we misunderstood. Maybe God, didn't say that because that wasn't to be the case. Anyway, God comes, clarifies, you're going to have a son. It's not Ishmael, it's someone else, and it's going to be through your wife, Sarah. So then that does happen. That happens 13 years after Ishmael is born. So again, there's this period of 13 years, and we talked about this an hour ago as we were in the Sarah room. Why 13 years? Why did God kind of allow this period of struggle, I would say? Probably a lot of emotional stress in that moment. There's this promise, and we're still not having it, and doggone, I'm almost 100, and the missus is almost 90, and did we misinterpret what's going on? And then the 3 visitors come to the tent, say as much, say, we'll see you next year with your own son. Sarah laughs, ultimately has that son, names him Laughter, also known as Isaac. So that's the story. That's Isaac. This is like this momentous person. I mean, just imagine, we're talking likely at least 2 decades between when Abram was told you're going to have a son to when Isaac actually shows up. It's my best guess. And defying all manner of societal norm. Again, I don't know what kind of medical wisdom they would have, but surely they're looking around and seeing not too many people are having kids at age 100 and age 90 at this point. So this is, defies all of what one would expect. Clearly a God thing. Isaac is the promised son. Hallelujah, praise the Lord. And then we get this episode. So let's go back to the actual original narrative and take a look at this episode in its original text. So go to chapter 22 of the book of Genesis. Hold a finger, whatever you hold in a digital Bible if you're using that, and go back to Genesis chapter 22. Let's see this story. All right, can I get a volunteer to read the first 2 verses? Genesis 22, verses 1 and 2. Do we have any volunteer? Perhaps somebody real close to the cameraman who could help us out.
How about that guy in the red shirt?
That guy in the red shirt, yes, I've heard him a few times. He had volunteered. Whether he remembers he volunteered or not, it was to be determined.
What am I reading?
You're reading Genesis chapter 22, verses 1 through 2. Please.
Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham. Here I am, he replied. Then God said, take your son, your only son whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I shall show you.
Okay. Yeah, interesting vocals you put into that one, Mr. Redshirt. So sometime later, my dialect says something similar, after these things. We're not told how long. So why that's important is we don't know exactly how old Isaac is at this point. The rest of the narrative that we see indicates he's not a toddler, probably not an adult, probably in the pre-teens-ish, maybe 8 to 12, something along those lines would be your best guess. But sometime later, God gives this directive. We are told, the readers of this narrative are told that God was testing Abram. Abram was not told that. Does Abram reach that conclusion? I don't know. But it's not, hey, I want to test you, so we'll take your kid and go. I'll show you where to go. He's just told, take Isaac. Go to this mountain I'm going to show you. Again, it's like the call from 2 rooms ago. Go to the place I'll show you. He's not told where exactly. He's not told how long it's going to take. None of that stuff. Just go to the place I'm going to show you, and you're going to sacrifice this kid that we just talked about. 2 decades in the making, all the things that God promised, his descendants will be as numerous as the stars in the skies, and you want me to kill him? What? All right, so think about, again, the fact that we're told as the reader that this was a test. Abram was not told that this was a test. Before we go further in the narrative, let's try, I want to ask you all, our museum visitors, to put yourself, as best one can, in the mental state of Abraham, getting this directive from God. What are some thoughts that are running through your mind at this point? Let's hear them.
Do I tell my wife?
All right. Do I tell my wife? And the narrative kind of suggests he didn't, actually, but we'll get to that in a second. Who do I tell? I hadn't thought about that. That's a good question, yes. What else? What's that?
Why me?
Why me? Sure. I mean, a question that's often asked when God poses something challenging, something truly testing our faith. Why? Say what?
Isaac's place.
So maybe the dad is like, I hope when we get there that I can be the one sacrificed and Isaac can come down from the mountain. Would God allow that? A sort of a change in the directive. Good. Yes, sir, with the camera.
It's interesting that verse totally discounted the fact that he had another son.
Yes, your only son, exactly. It's like Ishmael was sort of written out of the script at this point. He existed, and God had assured Hagar, I don't remember whether we read it or not, but when Hagar was first basically kicked out of the house, and actually the second time she was kicked out of the house, when she actually had Ishmael, and she was below the tree, and they were about to die of thirst, and God assures her, I see you, I see your son, he'll be great. But they were basically out of the family at that point. So yeah, at that point it was as though Isaac was truly the only son of Abraham. Yes, sir?
Many years ago, he had faith that God was going to take him to a certain place.
Yes, sir.
Without knowing where that is.
Correct.
I think the same faith was there when he knew and he'd been told that Isaac was going to be his son and do all these things. He still believed, no matter what God told him now, that God was going to fulfill that promise no matter what. Either he was going to be able to sacrifice his child and God was going to bring him back, or something else would happen. He had that solid belief already.
Good, and clearly that's correct. I mean, we know that's correct because we know the end of the story. That's correct because the inscription that we just read on the east wall indicates as much. And maybe his mind was there from the get-go, to kind of get back to my question. Maybe he wasn't, he didn't lose his mind when he got this comment. Maybe he just had such assurance in God, such peace in the midst of this crazy assignment that he felt okay. But if he didn't, what were some other thoughts he might have had if he wasn't quite in that mental framework? We've hit a few. Any other ideas of things that might be racing through Abraham's mind?
What am I going to tell my wife?
All right, if I don't tell her ahead of time, what am I going to tell her when I come back and I don't have a kid with me? Good. Yes, sir.
I was thinking, Scripture does not say this explicitly, but could this have been something that was going on in the region or the society or the time frame in other cultures, as if they represented believing loyalty to their deity by doing such an action? And Yahweh testing Abraham is like, let's see where your loyalty lies. And again, Abraham doesn't know that it's a test, but he does not seem very shocked. The instant obedience to the instructions and the orders, almost to me, as I'm looking at it, I'm kind of like, okay, this is not really necessarily shocking as it would be to us today. So I wonder if there wasn't some sort of cultural, societal, regional influence that this is a bit of an opposite dichotomy.
Yeah, no, excellent observation.
Because I remember Ahab and Jezebel, when the people hid the Baal, they used to offer their own children to their god.
Absolutely, yes. We definitely know that was a pagan practice, closer in time to us than Genesis 22. We don't know whether that was existing even back in the Genesis 22 timeframes. But yes, Stephen, you're absolutely, I think your name is Stephen, right? Okay. We know that was a practice that God condemned. And he didn't want sacrifices, and he certainly didn't want, he wanted sacrifice in a certain sense, but he clearly denounced human sacrifices, clearly denounced child sacrifices. Were they prevalent in this moment to where this call looked like a call to do a pagan practice? And if so, would Abram respond cooperatively or protest or seek clarification, or would he trust God even though this seems like this is out of character for him? That was one of the things that I thought. I'm posing this question to you. Let me spit out one of my answers. This seems contrary to the God I know. One, in terms of who I'm sacrificing, and two, the fact that I'm being asked to sacrifice a person. And if Abram had those kind of thoughts, then maybe again he went back to the question we discussed a bit a room ago, if not 2 rooms ago. Was this really God communicating to me? And if so, let's walk through that. I see a couple of hands, and we're going to probably circle back to that. But yes, sir, in the red.
Like earlier, though, God had told him that it was through Isaac that his seed would go out to the world. And,
Yes.
So.
Right.
So if he remembered that, that would either, make him feel better about this, or he would be really confused.
Yeah. And I'm thinking more the confounding. Obviously he went, so he did not respond as I expect I would have responded. I would have remembered that promise, and I would have said, if I'm to kill him, then how exactly is he going to become going to have kids, in generations as numerous as the stars in the sky? This doesn't make sense. Is this really God? Did I just make a left turn in my brain? Did I have a bad dinner and I'm waking up with some fog brain, and now I'm thinking God's talking to me when it really isn't him? Or there's no talk at all and I'm imagining this? Or is this Satan in my ear whispering something that ma'am, you had your hand up.
Yes, as somebody that longed for a child and only ended up having one, my thoughts in this
Good,
situation
yes, let's hear your perspective.
would have been like, excuse me?
Yeah.
Honestly,
Sure.
hanging on to the fact that, this amazing blessing has come.
Finally.
As a promise from God, and now you're going to ask me to do what? Like that. I think that even if obviously he had incredible faith.
Right.
But I think even with that, there had to be a moment of, excuse me?
I do too.
You let me love this child and have this promise and this blessing, and now you're going to turn that? There had to be that moment.
I agree.
Even if it was just quick.
Right.
There had to be at least that thought in
Yeah.
my mind.
Great perspective. I'm glad you shared. Yes, sir.
I think the text probably helps us answer your question. If I can cheat and go ahead a little bit.
Well, we're going to go ahead in a little bit, but I didn't want to go there just yet. I want to wrestle with the question a little bit. You're going to be my reader when we get to that next verse, okay? Because I do want to get there. I saw another hand or two. Yes,
I've got a feeling I was going to say the same thing.
Okay.
And maybe we'll get to that, but I'll just make this comment. Not only was he faithful, but he was a good dad with the answer that he gives him regarding the sacrifice that's happening.
Good points. I saw hands over here.
Scripture that we've already read
All right, yes. We want to stay where we're read.
alludes to, it was documented later, but it's still scripture, so we know it's pure and true. I agree with Warren and the man in the red shirt. His faith and his dependence, he's already been justified by faith.
Yeah.
And he, look, I wish I had his faith. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if I could, you know, I don't
I'm
want
with
to be tested in that situation,
I'm with you.
especially if you're doing it.
Yeah, right. It's one thing to kind of send them off.
I mean, without looking ahead, which we'll see, but it's been stated, and it's just like he did the first time. He walked by faith.
Amen. Yeah, no, and there's a reason this room exists. There's a reason why Abram is in this museum, and he's in here twice, as it turns out. Yes, ma'am.
From Genesis 1:1 till now, is this the first testing? I mean, would you exactly count what Noah did at testing? Because God said, build a boat in land where there is no water, and you're going to have rain, which you don't know what that is, and you're going to put all these animals in it. And I mean, it doesn't say it's a testing where this specifically says
That's a good question.
God tested Abraham.
Testing in the sense that I'm going to partially reveal what I'm planning, and you're going to know just enough to do what I say and not really know the end result. I mean, I think, and I think you're distinguishing from Noah's task being a huge test of faith. Just, you know, can I do this? Is this the craziest thing? That's a good question, and I don't know. I mean, we only have 22 chapters between Genesis 1:1 and here, so I don't recall any other episode being described as a test as this one is. So this would, if so, be kind of an unprecedented experience with God, which would also create more of a faith opportunity for Abraham to thrive or to fall.
I think the testing would be to see what your commitment is. I mean,
Yeah, believing loyalty is what this gentleman uses as the word for faith. Agree.
I was just curious.
No, and I like
I
your.
think it's the first time it may use those words. I don't know, but
I think you're right.
not what Noah had to go through.
I like your curiosity. I like when you ask curious questions, ma'am. I'm glad you're on the tour. So let's put ourselves again. We scratched this just a little bit last room. The whole idea of, is this God speaking to me? If we ever find ourselves in that situation, when we have what we feel is a directive, and it seems like it could be God, or in this moment it seems like it surely couldn't be God, what are some things we should do to kind of check that fundamental question before we decide to step in obedience or to reject it as not God or whatever? Recall some of the things we talked about last week? There was a few of them, and we kind of flew through it, and I'm going to have to fly through it again right now because I want to cover this room. But some things we do to kind of see, is this God? Yes?
I don't know if it's an answer to that, but.
Well, share what you're going to share, then I'll kickstart the other one.
I was thinking about, like, when he first told him to go, he didn't really question that. It says he went. When they told him about having Isaac, that's when they kind of questioned things a little, laughed or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But this time, it's like, I wonder if they've learned from that. Like, you know, he's faithful. And like, for me, I have to remember that when I feel like God's telling me to do something, to remember back in the past and what he's done and his faithfulness. So I don't know if that's answering your question.
I think it is.
But I was thinking about that because I'm like, did he question it when they, you know, because it seems unusual that it doesn't have any dialogue of him saying what his response was. It was
Right.
just the next morning he got up and did what he was supposed to do.
You went ahead.
So I was looking back and like, I knew he questioned when they said they were going to have a child.
Right.
but-
And both laughed, by the way. We know about Sarah's laugh. That's a little more prominent, but Abram
then
laughed
we read
initially.
what he laughed
Mm-hmm.
too. So, but when I looked back and they didn't. He just went. There wasn't any really
Okay.
questioning or like we would have.
So I would say yes to your premise. Is that an answer to my question? I think it is. I think one of the things that we can do is to reflect on what God has already done, perhaps in our lives, at the very least as depicted in this book. Now, Abram didn't have this book. Abraham didn't have this book. Genesis didn't exist, and if so, it would have been 21 chapters, and that's not, and then right here on page 36, by my version of the Bible, and not 1,000, whatever. So, but we have a record of God, of who he is, of what he's done, of what he has, how he's been described, how he has described himself. This is a great aid in trying to figure out and decipher, is this thing that I'm about to process and do or not do, is this of God? Another one, just to kickstart, because I do need to get to this room, these two paintings are worth much focus. Another one we talked about again was get counsel from others. Ideally, counsel as to a spiritual issue should be sought from spiritual people. should be sought from brothers and sisters in Christ, not from others. Sometimes counsel needs expertise that that is of a technical nature, and you can find that medicine or whatever. But if the question is this God speaking to me? Enlist some others to kind of pray through and work through that issue and kind of listen to them. Holy Spirit might use their voice to give you the answer you're seeking. And I mentioned prayer, certainly. Obviously, you want to pray that God can enlighten you and inform you, and there's lots of directives in this book to tell us to do that. Circumstances, we talked about that last week. Sometimes that is a help in discerning, is this God or not? I would say that's probably the least precise tool. I would not encourage us to rely on circumstances too much, because that's just too manipulable by us, by others, by Satan. Have more than one tool is the point of saying. Yes, sir?
How about waiting too? In other words, don't just jump and do it. Say, let me think about it, see if God keeps.
And there's some wisdom in that. Absolutely. If we know it's God, then the waiting time needs to cease. But if there's I hear what you're saying, and I agree with it. Just as long as we're not abusing the whole idea of waiting, and now we're ignoring God under this theory of waiting for some confirmation, and God said, you're supposed to have gone a month ago. Why are you waiting anymore? And now that door's closed, and someone else gets the blessing, and you don't. Anyway, all right, so we're walking through all this. So Abram has this, what I would call an extreme directive, seems contrary to anything he would have expected to hear from God, contrary to God, I would say, certainly contrary to what he understands to be Isaac's path moving forward. So what happens next? This gentleman was about to read, and I shut him down, but we can go ahead and get to the next verse, if you'd be so kind, Mr. Cameraman, to go to...
How far down do you want to go?
I want you to read just the next verse at this point. We're gonna cover more of them, so maybe you can kind of be on the ready, but just do the next verse.
Okay. 22:3.
Yes, sir.
Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. Then he cut enough wood for the burnt offering. He set out for the place God had told him about.
All right, stop right there. So when did he leave?
Early the next morning.
Yeah, mine doesn't say the next. Mine says early in the morning. Some dialects say the next morning. Clearly the implication is like he went and did it ASAP. Similar to what we saw in Genesis 17 when the first call came, get up and go to the land I'm going to show you. The passage doesn't use timing phraseology so clearly in that one, but it indicates that Abram responded appropriately quickly. God was pleased with him. It was like, hey, I told you a month ago, let's go, let's do this thing. So Abram has this ability to, I think, determine that, yes, this is God, and once he did, the waiting was done. And the immediate action followed, in fact, the next morning. And you made a comment about, did he tell his wife? We don't see anything in here about kind of him explaining what he's about to do other than I'm taking 2 servants, I'm taking a donkey, taking some wood, taking my kid, taking a sharp knife. We'll see you whenever we get back, essentially, is kind of what's going on. All right, go ahead, and you can take the next verse if you would, sir.
On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance.
All right, so pause right there. So what important fact did we just hear?
It took them 2 days of traveling at least.
At least, yeah. Is the 3rd day the morning of, and so they're on the road for 2 full days, or at some point during the 3rd day? This is not like go down the corner and do this. This is haul off. I'm going to tell you where. That was the directive that God gave Abraham. Get up and do this thing at the mountain I will tell you. So Abram saddles up his people, and he's doing this thing. Day 1, the sun is setting, and God doesn't say, all right, here it is. See that over there? No. So he wakes up the next morning, saddles back up, continues on his journey. That day comes to an end. Still no word from God. This is the place. Think about this directive, and now it's taking 2 days. Not just the hassle of traveling 2 days. I think that's a minor issue as compared to, I envision, the mental challenge that Abraham has now to continue being steadfast in this call. He's got 2 days to be thinking thoroughly through this issue, and maybe that thinking time helps solidify his faith and calm his nerves. It certainly has the potential to do the opposite, I think. has been tempted him to second guess, and this is the craziest thing I've ever heard, and God doesn't speak to me anymore. Maybe I'm already off the path, and maybe I could envision rationalizing a lot of different things that had happened right now during those 2 days and into a third day before he's finally told, "This is you've landed." I'm seeing a hand over here. Yes.
Yeah, in those days, if they traveled 10 to 15 miles a day, that was a long way.
Right.
They would have probably been no more than 30 miles, but that's a hard track through the desert.
Agree.
A lot of time to think.
A lot of time to think.
Time with a child going, where are we going?
Yeah. Are we there yet, Daddy? We're not there yet, kid. It's all right. Go play on your phone. Just stop asking questions.
And what's he telling the servants? Yeah. Mm-hmm. What you talking about, Lord?
I think, and not only the duration, I mean, again, I'm envisioning, I can't swear to this, but I'm envisioning this is, a fairly arid place. It's not like he's walking through, scenic, lovely landscape. Maybe he is. Maybe he is. Maybe this is my brain just taking a left turn, but I'm thinking it's, a hard day, not only because of the task, but because the conditions are probably sunny and dry, and I'm kind of picturing Middle East desert sort of a setting as they're trekking along. So you got also the fatigue aspect, perhaps playing mind games with you. Yes, sir.
Just before that, one thing that I noticed and kind of questioned a little bit is it says that Abraham split the wood for the burnt offering. Now, he's a rich guy. He's got all kinds of servants. We know he had 2 of them with him. He's like 150 years old, and he's out there.
Maybe 110, but still, yeah. Right.
I didn't know if
What's
there
significant?
anything
That's a good question.
that he did it himself, and didn't assign this to someone else or that. So.
I would say probably yes. And I would say that because my view, and again, I'm just one docent of many here in this facility, but my view is if we're given stuff like that in the passage, it must mean something. Honestly, I didn't contemplate what that would mean. I'm glad that you saw that, but I don't think this has a lot of filler in it to meet a publisher quota of 1,000 pages. I think each word and each whatever has significance. It was significant in the time, and the record that we're now seeing and reading is significant. Some of these details maybe don't jump off the page at us as they might have for the early readers who would know that splitting the wood is an arduous task and this guy wouldn't do it, or I don't know, but I suspect the answer to your question is yes. I don't know what the answer is beyond that, but I think probably there is some significance that Abram split the wood. Maybe that's to keep the endeavor a little more private instead of having somebody do it and Mrs. finds out and says, "Why are you splitting wood? Where are you going? What is this all about?"
Take his mind off.
Maybe it's just to occupy himself because he's about to lose his mind over this idea, and this kind of grounds him.
Like intense obedience.
Maybe.
God said there is absolutely no room for discussion. We're doing this now. I'm cutting the wood. I'm grabbing that guy and that guy.
Yeah, the 2 closest guys. And
I don't explain nothing to nobody. God said we on the road.
yeah, good. Agree. All right, back to the narrative. You were a great reader, so let me see if somebody else could pick up. Can somebody read verses 5 through 9 of Genesis 22? Show me by hand so our guy with the camera can come and. All right, and against the back wall over there. I recall you're a good reader, so thank you for volunteering.
Then Abraham said to his young men, "Stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you." And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son, and he took in his hand the fire and the knife. So they went, both of them together. And Isaac said to his father, "My father." And he said, "Here I am, my son." He said, "Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham said, "God will provide for himself the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." So they went, both of them together. When they came to the place of which God had told them, Abraham built the altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar on top of the wood.
All right, thank you. So pause right there. All right, so here's the heart of the episode. And I want to specifically have you focus on the last sentence that gentleman read. He, in my dialect it says, he, meaning Abram, bound his son Isaac and placed him on the altar. So the paintings you see, the large paintings you see in either wall, the left and the right, east and west, are both depicting that scene. You'll notice that the picture on the right, your right, my left, is much more tranquil than the painting on my right, your left. And that begs the question, because the creators of this room and the artists who were commissioned to do these paintings were both tasked to depict this moment, the specific moment of binding Isaac and placing him on the altar. And the pictures, the fact that we have two pictures, calls us, the visitors and the docents, to pause at this moment and contemplate that episode specifically. I dare say I really never did before being tasked to come here and to talk to folks like you. I kind of read through the next verse, get to the heart of the matter, and he's going to raise the knife, and Isaac says, and the angel says, stop, stop, stop. But think about, if you had previously, let me ask this question. Had any of you previously given any significant thought to what that moment was like when Isaac was being bound by his dad? And it's okay if you hadn't, because I'm telling you, I really hadn't myself, just in all candor. All right, so I'm not alone in that episode. All right, maybe you had. Yes, sir.
That's what I was saying earlier about being a good dad. When Isaac asked, where's the sacrifice? You know, his dad could have said, you're it.
That's right. We got another 12 hours, kid. Just deal with it.
He didn't tell him to the last second when it was too late for him to bolt.
Yeah.
You know, so he didn't make him worry about
right.
all this. He just said, "Hey, the Lord will provide."
Right.
And
yeah.
that was a good answer.
Better than you're it.
Had the enough faith in God also to realize that God would either take care of him in death or find a replacement.
Or faith in his dad.
In his dad and his God.
Yeah.
Yeah, all great questions, all great observations. Again, we're admittedly speculating, because all we're told is he bound his son Isaac and put him on the altar. This painting here depicts a very compliant Isaac, one who is willingly bound. Why would he be willingly bound? Again, we don't know. We don't know if Isaac is told once they get there, send the directive of God, our God, the God who has blessed his family and guided us. You know, I don't know whether Isaac was told with loving kindness the harsh reality that you are the sacrifice. And I don't know what's going to happen next, but I'm following God step by step and trusting him, and I'm praying that you would do likewise. And the son says, I trust you, Father. I love you, Father. Go ahead. Here's my hands. You know, bind me and stick me on here. This painting is sort of depicting an episode that looks like that. Very tranquil, very, again, Isaac isn't having to, or Abram isn't having to fight Isaac as well as his own mind, running through all kinds of scenarios. I personally think this is not the experience that Abram had. I think Abram had this experience over here. Again, we don't know how old Isaac is. We presume that he is a preteen. The narrative suggests he's not an adult. 13 would be kind of adult in that culture, so it suggests he's still a kid of some kind. Is he 12? Is he 8? Is he 9? We're not sure exactly. But this picture here is where my mind goes, and you can see the chaos. This picture envisions the hard reality becoming known to Isaac, whether dad tells him or he shows up and they build the altar and he looks around and he realizes there is no animal and there's only two people here and one has a knife and the other is me and I'm scared out of my mind. Or maybe dad tells him the same thing I just went through, lovingly, kindly, son, God told me to come here and to sacrifice you. However Isaac learns it, Isaac is a kid. And he's screaming out of his mind, and he's running around like crazy, and dad is physically tackling him so that he can kind of get him and control him and tie him up and put him in a position where he can be on the altar. And once he's on the altar, he's not sitting there, okay, Father, I love you. He is screaming out of his mind, hollering, trying to do whatever he can do, his gut instinct of survival. Again, we don't know which of these scenarios, or some third scenario, is what Abraham actually experienced, but if one can give himself or herself in this group a moment to pause and think about, he bound his son Isaac and placed him in the altar. What would that have looked like and felt like? Again, these are two depictions of the potential of what that scene might have looked like. I personally think this one's a little more accurate. I do think that However compliant Isaac might have been, he still has a survival instinct. I think any person in that situation, fully mature, would probably have a hard time sitting there calmly as Dad ties him up and is about to plunge a knife straight into his chest. And I think you amplify that scenario by being 8 years old. If that's the case, just I would like to envision, I like us to envision thinking about Abraham in either of those scenarios. Let's go with this one. Isaac is completely submissive, compliant with Dad, is allowed to be tied up willingly, lays on there willingly. What impact would that potentially have on Abraham if Isaac is behaving like this? Is that easier for Abraham, harder for Abraham? I don't know. I'm putting it out here. What are your thoughts on how Abraham would be dealing with this scenario, sacrificing Isaac, who seems willing to do whatever Dad says?
I think there's no scenario where it will be easy for him,
I agree.
period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And part of me wonders if Isaac is really so supportive of Dad that maybe makes it harder for Dad. I'm kind of having a hard time articulating it. Yes, sir, you had.
Yeah, I think we see Abraham's complete faith here earlier when he said he was going up to worship and we will return.
He did say we,
So
yes.
he had a feeling that Isaac, the Lord was going to keep that promise through Isaac, that he's coming back one way or another. Either he's not going to be sacrificed, or some way he's going to, survive, or he may, the Lord may bring him back to life. But in one way or another, he's coming back.
I guess and I agree, the passage does say that, and if those words were spoken as being true when spoken, then he would have that faith. Part of me puts out there, maybe he's just telling the servants a lie, so that the servants will not question as he walks off with Isaac and comes back with one person instead of two. I don't think that's the case, but you just never know.
And commentators that I've read think that Isaac was actually in his 20s, maybe even 30 years old.
Really?
At this time, so it was kind of interesting.
If that's the case, that is a different scenario. Yeah. Did I see your hand up, sir?
Let's look at 8 for a second. I think it answers a little bit of the dilemma and addresses both the fear of Abraham and Isaac. Abraham answered, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. Oh, he's talking to him now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to kill you. I'm going to sacrifice you, but instead of you, there will be a substitute, as in the case of Jesus.
Clearly, this episode foreshadows God sacrificing Jesus.
Finish, my son. And the two of them went on together. So there was faith, definitely faith shown by Abraham, and reassurance to Isaac. So when Isaac went on the altar, he had those words in some manner in his head, which gave him reassurance that I will not ultimately be the real sacrifice, even though he didn't see the lamb in the thicket later.
Right. Good. Great thoughts. Yeah, I mean, if Isaac's paying attention and hearing those words, or they give him comfort as now at the mountaintop, and either he's screaming but he slows down because he remembers that Dad said that. Did I see hands? Yes, sir.
In Genesis chapter 18, Abraham actually speaks with Yahweh in human form, pleading for the residents of Sodom. Abraham, I believe, is approaching this totally with just instant obedience and not necessarily any sort of outside kind of like opinion or ability to do anything other than follow the instructions. He's seen Yahweh's grace, mercy, negotiation before. And he knows who Yahweh is. There is no room
By experience.
by personal,
Yeah.
physical audible experience for a while now.
Right.
And yes, I understand looking at his son is actually a human form of a miracle from a 100-year-old man and a 90-year-old woman. And the name means laughter. There has to be so much more solid confidence that even the shocking attribute of this command from Yahweh, you see in all of his actions, there is no hesitation.
And there's no negotiation.
True. Yeah, I mean, and why I'm asking us to pause at this sentence at the end of verse 9 is because that sentence gets easily lost in this narrative. And perhaps it gets lost in this narrative because the narrative is so focuses on Abram's faithfulness that we are not. It's not that we're to ignore the challenges that he as a father would likely have had mentally and otherwise, but that the focus is on the fact that whatever those were, Abram followed diligently, obediently, because he had this prior experience. He didn't negotiate, he didn't stall, he didn't. But we at the museum wanted to really be sure that its visitors and its staff, be it paid or volunteer docents, more fully appreciated the magnitude of faith that this story really encapsulates. And the idea of the son, knowing more about the backstory, the idea of the trek that it took to go there, and that whatever version of the mountaintop experience was actual, whether it be peace, whether it be chaos, whether it be something in between, that there was still a father binding his son and ready to plunge knife into chest because God said so. A tremendous act of faith. Yes, ma'am, you had your hand up.
Miss Midge that I met earlier on the break.
Yes, I think she's over there. Right. Yes, ma'am. I recall her. Oh, you had a hand up. My apologies. My apologies.
Mine is more of a question. Abram, he was always making an altar and worshiping God, but I don't think that he had sacrificed anything on those altars. I don't remember reading that. So I'm wondering, and I know the pagans from reading the Bible, did those kind of things.
Sure.
But is this the first sacrifice, burnt offering, because the law hasn't been given yet?
Right.
So is this the first time we see a sacrifice of a burnt offering? And if it is, I think God is making a big point here for all the other, when the law was given and all those lambs and all that stuff that's sacrificed, that's a foreshadow, a type and shadow of Jesus.
Right.
And so I think, that's my question. Is this the first burnt offering sacrifice?
That is a good question. Yes, ma'am.
In Genesis chapter 8, verses 20, when the flood was over, it said Noah built an altar to the Lord and took some of every clean animal and some of every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar.
Okay. Good. And I didn't know the answer to that question. It was a good question. And
I remember them being an altar, but
Okay.
I don't remember about the burnt part. So
yeah. Clear, whether this is the first or not, this episode hopefully is really clear in foreshadowing and depicting what would ultimately be God the Father sacrificing his promised son on the altar, so to speak, the cross, to appease the sin burden that mankind has brought to God. So this episode shows it in a more human form. Let's get to the rest of the story because I'm about to run out of time. I want to be sure you guys have 10 minutes to walk around here. Can somebody else read? Just kind of go through the rest of the story. So actually verses 10 through 19, it's a longer passage, but just to save us some time, somebody throw your hand in the air, brave soul. How about you, sir? Would you be willing to do that?
Yes,
Hang on 1 second. Yes, guy in the white says coach something on your sleeve.
All right. Then Abraham reached out and took the knife to slaughter his son, but the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. He replied, Here I am. Then he said, Do not lay a hand on the boy or do anything to him, For now I know that you fear God, since you have